Hey y'all, let's go there.
A year, Carla. It's huge.
I'm glad you told me.
Yeah, I know, right?
I didn't,
It's so easy to not think about it.
I mean, it's ridiculous. I almost blew right past it.
Yeah, yeah. 1 year is a big deal in the podcast space because, as you know, it's incredibly hard to stay the course.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where people generally kind of start and then they, fall off, or they get, they realize it's a lot of work and it's a lot of time and all of these things. But a year of Let's Go There. How do you feel about 1 year?
Well, first of all, I have to say thank you. This podcast would not
Mm.
exist without you and your team at Your Media. And so it's so nice to see your beautiful face from, behind the scenes. So thank you for doing this, Stacey, and thank you for all of your support. And thank you for all of your pep talks, because quite honestly, there have been times where I've wanted to give up. And I've been transparent with y'all about this. Like, what are we doing here? And you haven't let me, which I'm very appreciative of.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I'm feeling gratitude.
Mm. Mhm. Yeah. I think we need to give a shout out to Anna too. I
Yeah.
was thinking about that earlier today. I really, we came in, so I came into working with you, Carla, kind of partially way through, right? So total in this entire year, you've done 42 or 40 raw files,
Hmm.
42 interviews, guest experiences.
Hmm.
So that's a lot of content. That's a lot of creation. It's a lot of energy and conversation. And, we came in kind of partial way. I think it was about episode 7 or 8, maybe, or a little later in.
Hmm.
And Anna, your original producer, who's amazing and did such a stunning job of supporting the initial creation of the show, really want to shout her out. And I hope that she's doing amazing in all of this.
It's so funny. I went on a walk with Anna yesterday. So I
Ooh.
got the opportunity to thank her. And yeah, Anna Rinke was my muse in all of this. I mean, it all started with a call,
Mhm.
and she was the one that pushed me to do this. It was her brainchild, and it was born out of the very way that we met. We met basically on a internal podcast at IBM where she was interviewing executives, and she brought me on, and we went viral internally. And so she really wanted to put that out into the world. And so I'm grateful to her. I wouldn't have started any of this without her.
Yeah. I really encourage listeners, if you haven't already heard this episode 5 that you guys did also on the podcast of Let's Go There. So this was an initial conversation, and Anna interviewed you
Mhm.
for the show. And that was a really remarkable episode. If y'all haven't heard that one yet, it's definitely a great listen as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's an amazing young woman who's had a profound impact on me and my family, and vice versa. It's one of the beautiful multi-generational friendships in my life right now.
Yeah, I love that so much. And, we did a little check in on the first episode on Let's Go There, The Call. Again, an episode that if you are a listener of Let's Go There, because I'm also assuming that some people that might be hearing this episode might be brand new to the show. And sometimes we hesitate to go back and listen to original episodes, but there's a lot of context here for what Let's Go There is about. So I would encourage anybody that hasn't heard this to go back, listen to the call, listen to episode 5. You'll really get some amazing insight into Carla's show and just some of the key energy that was behind this whole origin for the show. I know that you really trusted the call, that you were getting those nudges everywhere. What was that really like for you to step into a space like podcasting that you didn't really have experience in per se?
Yeah, I'm so glad you've had me re-listen to it, and I want to get your thoughts about it as well, and what you thought when you heard it. But I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I think I was pretty transparent on that initial episode that I was just going to put one foot forward, and then take the next step, and then the next step, really not knowing where it was going to take us. Um, but I was just going for it. And I did feel very called. I still do. I still ask myself all the time, what am I doing? What am I doing this for? So yeah, I just followed it. I trusted it. And I still do trust it, even though I may not fully understand it.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly think some of the best creative projects start that way. where you start out with this sort of unknown and just following that nudge and you're committed, but you don't know exactly what it's going to look like. And my experience listening back to that episode is it's just such power. It's such creative power. And I think now seeing where you've trusted that nudge each time, you've had a lot of guests and conversations coming into it where you didn't really have extreme clarity on why do I feel the nudge to have this person on? And yet it was an amazing decision to do so, so there's these moments where we kind of flow with that trust, and I think you've really exuded that through this whole experience, so it's really exciting. And I just really want to acknowledge you, Carla. This is having that moment of, okay, I'm going to put myself out in front and center and cultivate these conversations and create a space for people to share their stories, intimate stories, personal stories. It takes courage. And so I really want to acknowledge you for that, because yeah, it definitely takes something for sure. And my hunch as a podcast producer, somebody who is in the inner workings of people's shows a lot, is I think it is such a deeply vulnerable medium in general. Long form mediums are hard, right? Because you're kind of like front and center. There's nowhere to hide, right?
Wow.
And you've really done that artfully and honestly, which I know I really appreciate, but I know your audience does as well. And in a time where there's so much media, so much noise, your show has really created a platform for real human connection
Hmm.
and conversations and getting to see each other as human beings. You've had some amazing guests on here who are, leaders in their field, people who are incredibly powerful. And also we got to see their heart.
Yeah.
We got to really connect to who they are. And so, yeah, thank you for creating that space and trusting yourself.
I will receive that. I appreciate that. It has
Mm.
been challenging at times, and you've seen it. You've witnessed it firsthand, where I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are zooming in on my face too much, and I don't want to post my damn face to social media anymore. And I've been like such a brat about it. And those are like the superficial moments of resistance. But I really have to give it to our guests, Stacey, because they're the ones that are really bringing it. I did not anticipate the level of
Mhm.
vulnerability and authenticity that we would see on this show, but what I really didn't anticipate was how it's going to resonate with our listeners. And the
Yeah.
letters and notes and text messages that I get after an episode are always so moving. And that's really what keeps me going.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. It's been remarkable to see that. And I think also I'm curious about your experience with the guests, because I know you've mentioned, we've had incredible guests on the show.
Yeah.
Outstanding people, and every person bringing their own story. What has that experience been like for you once somebody shares their story? Are you getting feedback from guests as well about their experience on the show?
Yeah.
I'm curious about that.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I would say it's not uncommon for a guest to have a big download or big movement after the podcast. Either an epiphany or some piece of feedback that affected them materially. We saw it a little bit with Kyle Steed, and Kyle Steed and I send each other voice memos all the time. And when he sent me a voice memo after his episode, I was like, "Oh, Kyle, this is really powerful. Can I share this with the audience?" So we decided to share our voice memos. We didn't set out to do that for the show. That just happened organically.
Mhm.
That was him processing the episode. And that is not uncommon. That happens a lot. And we've had other guests who have had material shifts in their relationships in their families as a result of things that they shared in a positive way. Um, and so that's really moving to me too. Now, I also want to be clear. I'm not wanting to exploit our guests and their stories, and so it's this delicate dance, and that I only want people to share what they feel comfortable sharing. But what's super interesting is that the impact that this vulnerability has had on our audience. And it became apparent to me when one of our listeners called me, and he's the CEO of a company. I've mentioned him before. In fact, I'd love to get him on. And he lost his home in the Altadena fires.
Mhm.
And he was calling to check on me in the midst of the fires, not the other way around. So this tells you what kind of human being this is. And once I kind of heard his update and heard that he and his family were safe and okay, he said, um, Carla, please don't stop doing this podcast. And he said, it makes me feel super connected to the people that you're having on, even though I don't even know them, even though they are so different from me. And it makes me feel less lonely. And I said to him, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, John, I've lost the plot. I don't even know what this podcast is about anymore. And he said, of course you do. It's Ubuntu. You're showing us that we're all connected.
Yeah.
And I was just like mind blown. When he said that, it was just so moving for me. And then it tied a bow around this whole journey for me. That's really what I'm all about.
Mhm. Yeah. And we have a designated raw file on Ubuntu as well that we'd recommend listening to if you haven't heard that one. And you were referencing episode 48 as well with Kyle Steed, that voice note raw file there. Beautiful listen. There are so many that we could pull from and mention here. There are just so many moments and episodes. And we'd be so curious for those listening to this, what were some standout moments for you in this past year of Let's Go There? We'd love to hear from you. So send a note to Carla, whether that's via DM on Instagram or via the website, and just let us know kind of what you loved hearing, what really stood out to you, what moved you, because that really helps us curate that content too. It helps Carla know, okay, these are the kinds of conversations we want to be hearing more of, and really help bring more of that to you. But Ubuntu, that has been the stand post throughout all this, the lighthouse, I mean, throughout all of this. So yeah. Were there any sort of impactful moments that really stood out to you this year? Other ones inside of conversations, episodes, even just interactions with people about the show?
Yeah, I mean, I always have them in each episode. Each episode brings its
Mhm.
gift. I mean, I will think of like Andy, in Andy's episode, Andy Bateman, we were very much going on the same journey. And we had met right as the journey had kicked off for both of us. And we had just experienced the same thing in our careers. And we were going through the same sort of reflection and we're getting the same call, but we hadn't spoken of it. And then we saw each other a year later and we had somehow sought out the same practices and we're ending up in the same place. And it was just super fascinating. So his episode, for starters, there's just so much wisdom in it. It's magical, and he's such an amazing human. I spoke to him yesterday as well, so he's top of mind. But it just, for me, was really profound. Like he was a mirror. Everything he was saying, I
Mhm.
felt like, oh my gosh, yes, yes, yes. I could relate to all of
Yeah.
it. My episode with Antonio, I swear, like that felt like a real time coaching session. Like he was coaching me. I was like, oh my God, I think he's talking to me. And so it was that was also very special and profound. And Antonio was someone who I haven't physically met, who
Mhm.
showed up for me in my darkest hour with calls and jokes and text messages and love. And I mean, what the hell? I mean, talk about connection. We haven't physically met yet. And I can honestly say I love that man. And I would do anything for his
Mhm.
family. And so we've definitely got to fix that. But I felt like his episode was very profound. I mean, Elaine Pagels is magic.
Mhm.
I mean, that episode, I mean, I can't even begin to say all the magical things about Elaine. I mean, aside the fact that she's in her 80s and she's still traveling all over the globe and she's in love and she's challenging the status quo and she does yoga and meets me for coffee and yet is this just kind of brilliant mind. I don't know how I got so lucky to get to include her in my group of friends, but she is just magic. And the fact that she challenges with such love, like the way in which she challenges, it's not adversarial. It's it's just to get us think, to open up our minds a little bit, open up our hearts a little bit. I mean, I could go on about every episode, Stacey. There's been a moment in every episode. I mean, Lindsay shook us. Lindsay shook us's episode gave me so much joy in the moment, but when I went back and listened to it after the fact, I cried.
Mhm.
When she talked about not realizing how much love she had around her and looking up to see it and that she would never be alone, I was just I was like, damn. I mean, I could go on, but each one of these episodes, and before I stop, I will say doing the interview is one experience, but then going back and listening to the episode is a completely different one. So there are things that will hit me in the interview, and you'll feel me respond to it in the interview. But then when I go back and listen, it's a whole different experience because then I can relax my nervous system. I can actually settle in. There, I don't have to watch the clock. There's no work in it. And then it's completely different to actually listen to it.
Hmm. Yeah. I and I really want the listeners to know, like, there's a way that I have witnessed you cultivating these conversations with so much integrity and heart, because it is challenging to, hold space for conversation. Not, you don't do a ton of scripting. I think that that's important for people to understand. Some podcasts, they're really highly scripted to grab all these, kind of viral moments and these kind of provocative kind of, and that's where we want to be careful to not like oversell people's story or kind of, try to capitalize on that, and instead create these really deep, authentic moments. And I think that you have done that so artfully. And I'm so excited to see where you continue to go with this. You have this way of sort of drawing out people's, key moments and pivotal pieces of clarity to share. So I'm just really, it's exciting to hear a show like that,
Well,
because there's a lot of kind of like, let's just be real. There's a lot of boring kind of conversations and stuff like that, or, repetitive conversations. And I think it's refreshing to see real drop-ins, and I'm curious, for you coming into this, were you surprised by that? Were you surprised that the conversations were going so deeply, or is this something that kind of happens in your daily life quite frequently?
yeah. Oh, interesting. That's interesting. So I will say yes and no. It happens in my life quite frequently, and I did not expect it to happen on a podcast. Um,
Mm.
so let me say, to your earlier point, I am a rebel. I'm a rule breaker. One of the pieces that I got it, one of the pieces of advice that I got because I sought a lot of advice and market intelligence before getting started. One of the pieces of advice was, have a great interview strategy and have your questions, and don't do certain things. And I broke all those rules. And the goal was because I wanted to have a real authentic conversation. And in a real authentic conversation, you have no idea what that person is going to say to you. And you actually have to listen to it and be curious and dig in a little deeper. So I wanted
Mhm.
that. And I was taking a risk there. And I was actually told you will burn your first 20 episodes while you learn the
Mhm.
craft. I was told this repeatedly by multiple people. Stacey, we did not burn a single episode.
I was just going to say there was not one that we scrapped after the fact.
Yeah.
Not one.
And
Mhm.
so in my personal life, yes, I hold space for people. And ever since I was a little girl, I have loved going there with people, having the deep, meaningful conversations. And for people that trust me, they feel safe and their emotions come out sometimes immediately, in my personal life. And I didn't anticipate that on the podcast, but the same thing happened in the
Mm.
podcast. And I mean, I can think of in Karen Hawkins' episode, before we even get started, I think I said to her, "What's going on?" And she was starting to emote and getting misty-eyed before we even started. And I thought, "Oh gosh, she's
Mhm.
getting herself ready. We're gonna really go there." And it was as if we were sitting, in my house having coffee. It was not as if we were sitting in a podcast studio. And that was part of the impetus of moving it to the house too, because the types of conversations that we were having were so intimate. There was something about the studio that didn't feel quite right.
Mhm. Yeah. And we've been in conversation about what that looks like moving into this, second year, another season, what is going to really complement the viewer experience, give you the best quality as possible, and also be authentic to Let's Go There,
Yeah.
and the energy of this show. So if the listeners, if you have thoughts on this too, what you've shared, you've seen a variety of studio styles
Mhm.
throughout year one. You've seen more of the studio-esque feel. We've seen in Carla's home. There's been a live viewing when you had the event with Yemi and Moonshot. There's been a variety of sort of aesthetics, and we'd love to hear from you, like what really stood out, if something did, and what you value most in your experience of this show. Carla really wants to open up that dialogue for more of that community feel. Let's Go There was never supposed to just be about Carla and the guests. It was actually supposed to be about all of us and really the community experience. And opening up that dialogue is a huge factor. And I know really important to you, Carla. So, I think there's going to be some new things that you're going to be bringing in the next year, ways for people to connect, ways to start open up the conversation. So just know that that's coming as well.
Yeah.
Was there any kind of like bloopers or funny moments, behind the scenes that we didn't necessarily see, the viewer didn't see?
I mean,
Anything
we've had a
chaos?
lot of close calls, especially moving it to the house. Like the first time we moved it to the house, I didn't really like think through some of the details. Like, wait a minute, I have two dogs, or I had one dog at the time. The house next door to me is under massive construction. I'm in a very active neighborhood where there's always like construction and stuff going on. And then not to mention the fact that I had like my kids home from my son home from college. My daughter was still in high school at the time. My husband, I was like, oh God, it was kind of like this was not very sensitive of me to kind of shut down their home for a couple hours. So yeah, there were some moments. I think the the funniest is probably the dogs. Like, and thanks to your team, the audience doesn't know, but it's not uncommon for my oldest to be snoring under my feet during a raw file. Or we've had episodes where one of my dogs started barking and then came into the room to see what was going on. But outside of that, we've been really fortunate. I mean, I don't know how we've done it. Knock on wood, because
Yeah.
we have yet to not be able to film an episode. Like we've yet to have one totally go sideways on us. And there've been a few moments where I was just like, oh gosh, the tech may not work. And it's always worked out thanks to you and your team.
Well, I mean, it's an ongoing journey. Anybody who's been in the podcast or even YouTube or any space, it's like, you're always kind of juggling a little something. There's too many wires. There's, a weed blower outside or a leaf blower outside, it's one of those things. Yeah. I'd love to really point this to the audience for a moment, and show that appreciation, because there has been a lot of sharing, a lot of people, sharing big realizations, explorations, thoughts, takeaways, lengthy posts that I've seen going out of people sharing the podcast because of the tremendous impact it's had on them. The Obviously there's an appreciation that there's an audience here and listening, but Carla, I truly think you would be creating these because it's in you to create as well. But I think, just really showing that appreciation. It's been a year. I think there's so many people that have stuck around and are here and receiving each episode and downloading each episode and sometimes sharing each episode. What's that experience been like for you?
Yeah. First of all, some of those, well, I would say all of those posts have been unsolicited. So,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I will wake up to a post on LinkedIn and it's like, holy smokes, somebody just posted the most beautiful post about us and talking about the podcast and talking about what it means to them. I've received gifts. People have sent books of poetry and journals and as thank yous. I've had people stop me in the street to tell me how much the podcast means to them. So I'm exceptionally grateful. That, like I said earlier, Stacey, is what keeps me going. I'm so grateful to the audience. Um, this is the part I'm still, as you've kind of mentioned a couple of times on this episode, that I'm still trying to unlock, because I really want to build a community amongst our audience and I want it to be much more interactive. So I don't want it to be this two-dimensional thing. And I would love to get to a point. This is something we've been trying to figure out for a while, but it would be great if in this next season we could figure out how the audience could start to ask questions, things that they're going through that they're trying to figure out, that we could workshop, that they could bring up topics for us. I would love it to be much more interactive. And I'm a modernizer, I'm a disruptor, I'm a rebel. I'd love to disrupt the podcast space and make it a completely interactive experience instead of a flat one, and engage
Mm-hmm.
in real time with the audience.
Mm-hmm. And we're seeing those possibilities more and more. I think the sort of podcast space, as many of us have seen, there's sort of these top 2% of podcasts that are really well known.
Yeah,
And then we've got, about 8% in that top 10% that are a little more niche, a little more niche podcasts that are very successful, have a huge audience, but are not very well known.
yeah,
And then we've got, maybe about 5 to 10% also pulling big numbers that are starting to get more well known and create that community feel. And something that I'm really excited about for your show is, exactly what you're describing, having more of that communal feel, even maybe live recordings or panel recordings where you can bring in, multiple people to have these kind of more challenging dialogues, honest dialogues, and also community spaces.
yeah,
So something that, we're exploring is how to create that in a way that it doesn't add, more noise to people's life, but actually gives them a lot of fulfillment and connection. So
yeah.
I'm really excited for that. What are some other things that you really want to see in this next, let's say, year of the show, or even just season 4?
I am really ready to level up. So, we have not spent any money on paid media. All of our growth has been organic. I don't know that I even want to go in that direction, but I would love to break through and get to a point
Mhm.
where this isn't just a hobby and I'm not just funding it myself, but we actually are a sustainable, real business, real podcast, have advertisers that align to our mission and add value to our audience. That we can begin to staff this out, Stacey, so that we can build our social media presence, so that we can start to really leverage this content. I picture a book coming out of this content, like it's already starting to take shape. And a combination of the raw files and then these conversations, I think, are really starting to point us in a certain direction. And then something that is really beautiful that has unfolded, um, that really I didn't intentionally set out to do, but I am now working with some amazing people, and I think due in part to the podcast, not completely, but due in part to the podcast. And so that has been really fun for me because I really, in this age and stage of my life, I want to work with people that I love, and I want to do work that I love, and I want to do work for the greater good, to impact
Mhm.
humanity in a positive way. And that is starting to show up, which is like super exciting.
Yeah, I was literally just going to ask you, what is your commitment moving into this? But I feel like you just answered it, and, I definitely, something I will say that I know about you, Carla, and it's so refreshing and exciting is that sometimes when podcasts grow and they start to bring on advertisers and do these things, they kind of lose the essence of it
Mm,
because they kind of fall into that category of, well, we'll get rid of these things because they don't matter and we'll just focus on these things, kind of mainstream. And one thing I know about you is that you're not willing to do that.
yeah,
You're not willing to lose the essence and the integrity and the message and the meaning behind Let's Go There. And so that's a really exciting place to be because we know we're going to see this podcast grow and reach more people, and getting to do that in a way that's authentic to what you started this for.
yeah.
So
Well, I hope you'll keep me
yeah,
honest
it's
in that
exciting.
and remind me of that. But yeah, and
Yeah.
when we set out to do this, as much as I moan and groan and complain about quit and threaten to quit, I set out to do 150 episodes, from the start. At first, I thought it was like, okay, let's get to 50, let's get to 75, let's get to 100. But then I had a well-known podcaster say to me, you got to get to 150. That's about how long it
Mhm.
takes to realize whether or not you're onto something. And then Yemi, my dear friend, also said, anything worth doing, you do for 2 years, and come talk to me after 2 years of doing it, and then we'll discuss whether or not it's a success or failure. And the reality is, guess what?
Mhm.
150 episodes is going to put us right at about 2 years.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's really, I just want to normalize that too, for anybody that's maybe listening to this and wondering, "Oh, could I do something like that?" Or could I'm feeling this call or this nudge, to do something different with my life, or this, this purpose I want to chase, but I'm not sure if I can. Anything creative, I find, has that level of, I don't know if you've ever seen that graph where it's like, okay, this is good. It's okay. This is shit. I'm shit. And then it kind of goes all the way around again. Like anything creative kind of has that energy of, we go through times where we need people to kind of keep nudging us and keep nudging us. You're going to want to quit. You're going to want to stop. Doesn't mean that you're not onto something. It just means that you're in the creative process. You
Oh,
know, you're really exploring, you're being brave, you know?
I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
funny. That explains why you've been able to hold space for me when I'm in those moments of the cycle.
It's honestly, if I could normalize one thing for anybody in a creative space, it's that. And I know that intimately myself, obviously, but it's, you know, it's one of those things where when you're really getting close to that breakthrough, when you're getting close to a next evolution of what you're creating, there's going to be moments where you just want to stop.
Wow.
And you just, you know, you're like, no, it's not working. And you kind of get into that frustration and that turmoil. And then you come out the other side,
Yeah.
right? It's just a completely normalized part of the creative journey. So
Yeah.
just to put that in the space for you, Carla.
Oh, great. Yeah. And to be clear, the only time I get in that headspace is when I start to worry about success or failure. And I start to look at
Mm,
numbers and I start to put my, tech executive
yeah.
lens on it. And I start thinking about scale and I start thinking about returns. And that's the only time I get in that headspace. When I'm in the kind of
Mm,
creative life force space and I'm just focused on, oh, what's the conversation that people need to hear and who can I bring that can give us, the most insight or most wisdom on this topic, or what would be the most fascinating, or what do we all need right now? That for me is like full bodied hell yes. Every
mhm.
That's the part
Yeah.
I can't not do. And that's the part that I
Mhm.
haven't been able to like oppress or suppress in any way.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear that. Totally. I'm curious because season 3, you had this theme around healing that emerged in a lot of those conversations. Have you had any kind of hunch on what season 4 is going to be about?
Gosh, I should have been prepared for you to ask me that.
Well, I love that you're not because it's a fully authentic answer of just in the moment, anything that comes through.
So maybe it might be better to talk about how this process works for me, Stacey, because
Mhm.
I'm not there in the process yet. So I've been focused on season 3 and the season 3 guests. And the way the theme emerged was just based on the people that were coming into my life and who I was having on. And I was like, whoa, there is a thread here. Um, so I think when we sit down and I start to think about who we're going to bring on for season 4, I think it will reveal itself to us, just like it has for all the other seasons. Now, I did have somebody say to me, "Oh, Carla, you know that these are just mirroring your journey." And I was like, "Oh, there's that." So there's, what comes after healing. I don't know. We shall see.
Mhm.
But I think
Mhm.
as we sit down to think about the guests, I think it's going to unfold. But I never like
Brilliant.
decide the theme first and then the guests. It's actually the other
Mm.
way around.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of factors of how you've created this though that really speak to your self-trust,
Mm,
you know, because you could kind of angle this at what's the most, you know, popular narrative in the kind of general pop right now versus you saying, okay, this is what is true for me and what I'm hearing in the dialogues I'm having and this is where we're going. You know, there's a level of self-trust and practice in that. So, yeah, it's beautiful.
yeah. And we've broken all
Mhm.
the rules in that regard too. Like we didn't set out to target a certain audience, you know, a certain profile, a certain demographic.
Mhm.
It's just kind of emerging on its own. And I
Mhm.
wanted to focus on the content, on the conversations, and I thought, okay, the audience will reveal itself to us. And that's starting to happen.
Mhm. Definitely. Definitely. So if you are one of those audience members listening right now, you can raise your hand with that. These conversations are for you and this is a consistent check-in that Carla is having of, you know, how can I bring more value to you? So again, just that prompt to reach out and share and let us know what's really resonating with you. I think, you know, to kind of close out this episode, you know, one of the things that I've really witnessed in you, Carla, is that gratitude for the space to have these conversations and for the listeners for tuning in. And, you know, there's a co-creative process that happens here, right? Because you could just be trying to create your own brand versus trying to connect with others. And you're really trying to do that. You're really trying to connect with the bigger conversation for people. So, you know, this is really a co-created show. So this year has been, you know, for everybody listening.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Stacey. And thank you again
Mhm.
for everything
Yeah.
you've done for me and for us. And thank you to your team. And Thank you for always being so responsive. I worry about y'all. You're always on. Another conversation. But sometimes I send something and I'm like, please don't respond. Oh, and they responded. So I have to like not send you notes at certain times a day on certain days on purpose. But yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to you guys. I also want to say I am super excited by how we're closing out season 3. I think it's
Mhm.
the most powerful example of healing that I've ever seen. And it's so profound. And again, I don't know how I got so lucky to be able to be seated at the table and the way it all lined up. Actually, it's been a process that's been lining up for 2 years now. And then it just got served up in July and then got served up again when the people that were involved with this project just happened to be in Austin. I was like, I couldn't have dreamed this up or designed this any better. And the ability to have this conversation around a community that is healing is really, really inspiring to me. So I'm super, super excited about how we're closing out the season.
For those listening that haven't seen this yet, so if you're watching this, before, is it October 8th that one goes live?
Yeah.
There is a very special episode coming that Carla is referring to. It was, was it the week before you suddenly got word that this is going to happen and we just pulled it together and made it happen? And one of the most moving conversations that I've seen on your show. I'm really excited for people to hear this one. It is going to be in 2 parts, just to really honor the depth of the conversation too. Did we agree on that? The 2 parts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
broke it into 2. It's a lot.
And
So we broke it into 2.
yeah, it's a big conversation and so needed. And yeah, I'm just so excited for people to hear that one. And in the interim between season 3 and season 4, Carla's going to be sharing some rewind episodes. So because there's so many episodes from that have been created that maybe you haven't heard yet, or maybe you want to hear again, because like you, Carla, sometimes when I listen back to an episode that I, maybe was in a different headspace in when I heard the first time, and then I hear it again, I hear something completely
Yeah.
different. And there is just so much in there in people's stories and relating to each other in these ways. So we're going to do some rewind episodes. You're going to see some episodes shared again and some raw files potentially shared again as well. So just in that interim, so you can tune into those and you'll see season 4 launching in November.
Right. I'm excited.
Thank you, everybody. And as always, leave reviews for Let's Go There on the Apple Podcast platform, wherever you're listening. If it's on Spotify, if it's on YouTube, make sure you're leaving comments and reviews for Carla. Tell her in those reviews, or tell us in those reviews, how this show has impacted you. What's really stood out to you? What have you shared with a friend? And those reviews and those subscriptions and making sure that you're following the podcast everywhere is going to really help Carla bring even more conversations to you. So make sure that you are hitting all those buttons and sharing the podcast with your community.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Anything
much.
we're dealing with and trying to figure out, we'd love to help. You can send it
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
anonymously.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
We love an anonymous
Yeah.
share. So
Yeah.
please feel free to send those that way, or just share in your message to Carla that, hey, I'd appreciate if you don't share my name or my information. And she'd be happy to do that as well.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much, Stacey. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Carla. Congrats on 1 full year.
Thank you. Thank y'all for listening today. If you're so inclined, please follow, subscribe, download, share, all of the things so that we can keep going. We appreciate your support so much. If you're interested in learning more, go to thecoeffect.co.